Your race,
identity,
culture, and heritage matter.
Because of that, we've created a space
for safe conversations
that accelerate human connection
by exploring and acknowledging variations and points of view.
The goal
is to bridge the human divide.
Welcome to an episode of Rich Dialogues
on the Care More podcast.
I'm here with an organizational psychologist. I'm spending time in some rarefied air right now. Angela Howard, who has her own consulting firm. I'm so glad you took the time and made the time to be with us today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Reggie.
Okay, psychology, organizational psychology. How did you get into that? Why did you choose that as a profession?
Ooh, well, I actually started my education in clinical psychology. I thought I was going to be a clinical psychologist. That was my path. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I'm not able to do that. I needed to work with something that was a bit less focused on individual trauma. But now I work within organizational trauma, which is similar. But really, I'm working with behavior at work and understanding how systems work with people in them. Yeah. And we all have our own psyche and psychology, and that works together to drive an organization to success or not. And that concept fascinated me. Yeah. And then also my lived experience around navigating corporate America and understanding that I was having a different experience than other people also fascinated me. So that is kind of the intersection between my organizational psychology background, but also kind of me navigating in the space of DE&I.
Yeah, and this life work I talk about all the time, while it's complex, there's a lot of issues and variables to DEI, and I'm going to replace all that DEI language with just human capital people work. Yes. And when you sit in this space, I think there are some days that are better than others, and sometimes people get what we do, and sometimes people just don't get it or even understand why we exist in these spaces. So one of the things I want to talk about, especially because you pay attention to behaviors and culture itself, what makes a culture attractive to somebody else? What is an attractive culture? As you've been doing this work, now this is based all on your opinion, and based on your experience. What's an attractive culture to you?
Well, I think we have to start with motivation and what drives humans to feel and act a certain way. Because we know that when you feel something, you might verbalize that. And when you verbalize that, then you behave. Like there's like a chain of reaction when it comes to human behavior. And so what we do know, I mean, this is based on my opinion, but also research tells us that we want to feel like we're a part of something. We want to feel like we are celebrated in a space. And that can look like being a part of a community, using our passions and our interests to achieve a common goal. We are social learning beings, and we like to do things together. So I think an attractive culture looks like creating organic community where people from different backgrounds, different perspectives are celebrated. Yeah. So that's one piece, and that ties back again to motivation and how we actually operate as humans.
Yeah, and the thing that you're talking about, and I know you see this across different organizations, is you can say what the culture is supposed to be, but how it actually shows up when you talk to the people in the organization sometimes comes across very, very differently. As you've been doing this work, give us an example of a surprising thing that happened, and it's not about what client it happened at. It's like, what is the surprising thing that you run across that's the biggest gap between what leaders think and what the people actually think about the culture?
Well, there's a lot of work happening right now around well-being, wellness at work. And I think that a lot of executives, leaders, founders of organizations are throwing things at the wall programmatically, right? Oh, let's give everybody an app to help them meditate, or let's have yoga classes, or let's bring the healthy food truck. And all that is culture. And so what surprises me the most is when you're in these rooms with executives and they basically want to justify away all the things they've done around the culture they're looking to build, right? Well, yeah, we're a well-being culture. We've done this and that. And they list 35 things. And then you actually ask, well, what impact has that made? And it's silence. And we talked about this earlier, which is like a lot of executives are just stunned when they throw the spaghetti at the wall and nothing sticks. And employees are still saying, well, I don't feel well. I don't feel psychologically safe. You say that we have a flexible work culture, but you're messaging me at 9 p.m. You say that you want me to have work-life balance, but you're giving me unnecessary, ridiculous timelines. Words and actions aren't matching.
Yeah.
That's the biggest gap I see.
Yeah, and do you, in your predictions as you move forward, you think that's going to be controllable or going away anytime soon?
No, I think there will continue to be this gap. I think what we're finding is an awareness around how to close it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people spending time on, and everybody's like, what's the future of work look like? Like we're post-pandemic, really?
Not quite.
Anyway, but it's like people are coming back to work. So what's it going to be like? And I've got clients and or people that are making predictions as if they know what's getting ready to happen. And then they're putting things in place. So it's a 4-day work week now. Yep. We know that's what you'll want. Come on back. And they're dead serious based on some data set that suggests it might work. And I'm here to tell people, and I'm pushing this out, nobody knows. Stop saying you know what's going to happen, because you don't. If you had known, then how everybody was shocked 3 years ago, nobody would have been shocked. Right. And so I think about that in just the psychology of it all. And I hear you talk a lot about culture and just the essence of what makes an organization feel a certain way by their daily rituals, their daily routines, their daily habits. Have you ever seen this is going to sound weird, but you'll know what I mean. Have you ever seen a culture fail?
A culture fail? No, I don't think culture fails. Culture is. I think it fails people.
Okay.
A culture can fail business performance. A culture can fail results. But cultures don't fail. Cultures are what they are. Just like culture within society, right? Like we have a different culture than, the Middle East, or the Middle East with Asia, or, all these things are different, but they just are. And none of them are failing. But you can fail people. You can fail humanity. You can fail results.
Yeah, and that one of the reasons that is coming up in the DEI space is people are starting to blame the culture for why there hasn't been so much progress in DEI. And they're blaming the culture as if the culture is failing them. Like, you said this culture was an inclusive place, but it's not. So you failed me. And it's like, and I agree with you, what you're saying is like the culture didn't fail. It's the words, actions, behaviors, and intentions that aren't matching, that isn't working, that to the recipient, a member of the workforce of that culture, feels like the culture didn't live up to its name.
Exactly.
Or the vibe of what it is. What do you tell people to do when that happens?
Well, I think the first step is to regroup on some of your value system elements. So typically we were talking about ethos earlier, but I think about organizational identity, and I think about our mission, vision, values, any memorialization of what makes us who we are, what we're putting out on social media. I think we have to do an audit of those things and identify if that's who we are or who we want to be. Yeah. And societally, we've been through a lot of change. And I think it's fair to say these things may have changed, or you've, developed a new founding team, or you have a new strategy for your product. Like, all those things can impact culture, or you just want to do better.
Yeah. I don't think people spend nearly enough time trying to do better. I think people are just trying to keep up.
Yeah.
There's so much stress and polarization in the world right now. We're a nation divided, companies divided, communities divided, families divided. People are just trying to make it and keep up. But, if at some point a person makes a decision that there's a reason I'm here and they push through, you get a very different type of person, because then they don't get to blame the culture. And that's who to blame. It's like, what do I own? And what happens next to me? So I'm going to use that as sort of a transition into, you said how an organization identifies. I think people identify very differently at a very individual level. So I'm questioning you, how do you identify? How do you describe yourself?
How do I describe myself?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Because, I do, this is Rich Dialogues, Race, Identity, Culture, and Heritage. And I
Mm-hmm.
always ask people, it's like, how do you identify? Like,
Yeah.
who are you?
Well, I mean, I go back to my upbringing, right? I think about my parents. I think that's where we go first. So I identify as multicultural. And I also mentioned that I'm from Black heritage and Eastern European heritage. Both of those things are important to me because they mean different things. I've interacted and those things have intersected in different ways. So that's how I identify, but I also identify from someone who grew up in Chicago in Rogers Park. I'm an only child. That's also how I identify. We were talking about lineage and all of that earlier.
Yeah.
I identify as a entrepreneurial woman. Okay. These are all things that make me who I am, but also my values. Yeah. So my values around doing the right thing, around integrity.
So those things that you identify, so if you say, you're multicultural, that means a lot of things to a lot of people. Yeah. But we're going to stick with it in the context of how important is that to you that other people know that's how you identify? How important is that to you?
It's important to me because I think I'm functioning and we're functioning at those intersections all the time. And so I think it's important that people understand how I grew up. If they want to get to know me, they also need to get to know how I identify. And, there's always questions around the words, right? And so I think what matters most is what that actually means to me and how that changed or shaped who I am today.
Yeah. Do you think that how you identify has ever gotten in the way of your personal or professional life?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you navigate it? What did you do? I mean, our listeners are super curious to know how to deal with this. Because while you are in a space where you're shining a light and leading others towards certain things, not everybody knows how to do it. And it's usually by listening to the stories of others and how they made a choice to navigate a certain way that they go, I could try that. Or that's not for me. That's never going to happen for me. So how did you navigate those spaces at those times in your life where how you identify got in the way?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the workplace, because this is kind of, again, this is why how I identify and my interaction in corporate America, how it's shaped to the work that I do now is I was always different, at least visually, than the people that I was working with. So I worked in large organizations. I was in boardrooms, and I was usually the youngest woman of color in the room, always. And it impacted the way I related to other people or how I felt celebrated with the things I used to do on the weekends, right? While other people were talking about golf and sports, I was talking about, I don't know, going to a concert and that, the people around me didn't understand or even know who I was talking about and vice versa. So those things are important, I think, when it comes to belonging, is you're in a space where you feel like you're being celebrated. Yeah. And so I don't think I felt celebrated in the workplace. I felt acknowledged that I was this different person and maybe even tokenized at times, but I was never celebrated.
Yeah, and I think some of us, people in underrepresented groups in general, that they tend to hide parts of who they are in order to
assimilate.
Assimilate it, and even to the point where it's almost like I'm afraid if I tell you enough about how I identify and who I am, that it'll hinder my ability to belong here. So I won't tell you at all. And I try to get people to understand hiding who you are isn't healthy.
No.
It's never been healthy. And, when we do, and it then impacts the quality of our life, we then all of a sudden turn around and it's, I'm going to be unapologetically me. I push people, it's like, why didn't you be you a little sooner? You wouldn't have to be upset about it now and be unapologetic about it, saying this is what I am and who I am and what I believe and who I love and where I go and the places and spaces I'm in. And, as an organizational psychologist, I think there are some cultures that systemically make people hide.
Yes.
They make people hide who they are. How do you break that systemic thing down, as you get people, I know you have a culture blueprint, that you use. How do you break down the systemic barriers that are placed on some people inside of a culture?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is inviting people to the party. I mean, you have to involve everyone in the process because I think we have to acknowledge just the statistics of who's in leadership, for example, right? Who are the people making the decisions? That has changed and progressed a little bit over time, but the majority is overwhelming. And so you're talking about similar homogeneous backgrounds. And so the first step is really to include a representative group in the process so that you're getting different perspectives on how to actually even approach the work to make sure it's inclusive.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a step that a lot of companies, it's very top down. And again, it's not just about power or hierarchy, but it's also who is at that top. And they're not representative of your workforce.
Yeah. You can't get to a real answer. And I'm saying there are multiple answers to almost every situation, every question that we need to ask. But until you have diverse perspectives in the room and you hear them all the way through, not just invite them. Because I got this thing where it's like, invite everybody in. But then when people get there, they don't get to dance. They don't get to talk. They don't get to, but I invited you. That's performative to me. In my world, in my language, in my work, invitation is not nearly enough.
No.
And then you don't get a cookie for doing it.
No. That's table stakes.
Yeah.
First step. And there's, it's not just about the right thing to do. There's actually, a business case behind this. There's a human case, there's a business case behind this, which is, it's just the basics. Like, who are your customers? Who are your consumers? Do they look like your leadership team?
Yeah.
Probably not. They're probably diverse. So let's make sure we're matching those experiences to who you're serving.
I wonder, a lot of times, when people are hiding who they are, they're also hiding a part of the gift they bring into a room.
Yes.
And nobody ever gets to see that gift because they're hiding some portion of their story, of their narrative, because they think it's helpful at that particular moment. And it gets to this thing about excellence and what excellence really means. And I think we all have attributes of excellence in us all the time, our entire life, except we don't spend enough time actually letting other people see excellence in us. So what is excellence when you look at a human and go, if excellence is around us all the time, how do you define excellence?
Excellence is a construct that hasn't served all of us, is what I'm trying to say. So I think my version of excellence is our ability to reinforce behaviors of humanity. It means integrity and sticking to our ethics. It's doing what you say you're going to do. It's being authentically, using your capabilities, your superpowers to make others better. There's a community element to it, not just an individual element to it. So when I think about excellence, I don't think about me being excellent. I think about let's bring everybody along. Let's do what we need to do to spread excellence. So those are things that come to mind, but we're a very individualistic society.
That's right.
Our version of excellence, my version of excellence, and what I'm operating in. And I think that's what stifles or causes that code switching that you were talking about earlier too.
Yeah, because we code switch to survive, which I tell anybody who code switch, I just want people to hear this. That's not a bad thing. You're supposed to code switch. Are you kidding? If you were the same all the time everywhere, you'd have a very different life. Code switching is healthy. It is when it becomes unhealthy to your well-being, who you are, quality of life. You need to try to manage it. I've got some of my best mentors in my entire life told me to change. When you're in this environment, Reggie, don't be that way. It's not going to help you. At first, I bristled. I'm Reggie. Like, I'm going to be me wherever I am. They were right, though. In that particular environment, at that moment in society, being that version wasn't helpful to me. And my mentor said, I'm trying to help you get out of your own way. And so at some point, I transitioned from code shifting is bad. It's making me be inauthentic to who I am. No, it's strategic.
Yeah.
Code shifting is a strategic thing. You need to be very strategic when we code shift because it is how you become successful. You code shift.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Know your audience, right?
No, thank you.
That is absolutely. In the work that we do, we have to know our audience, and that's code switching.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, if you just think about the physiological part of code switching,
Mm-hmm.
it actually, I mean, again, I could talk about the brain all day, but when you code switch from something that's not authentically you, because I think you can code switch and still be authentic. Like our authenticity is kind of overused, but there's a spectrum to it.
Yeah.
But when you're code switching in environments that aren't authentic to yourself, you are dispelling and just spilling out so much energy that you can't. And that's what I always tell leaders is think about all the waste that you are producing within your organization because your people have to show up and put their work face on or their I'm talking to a leader face on. Like all of that is emotional labor and energy. And it's waste within organizations. It compounds over time.
Yeah, and then we say we're the sustainable organization.
Right.
Oh, I love that contradiction.
Right. Yes.
Like,
that makes sense.
Yeah. Pushing into, so Black excellence, like the phrase Black excellence, it's been used in brands and on campaigns, and it's become very popular in the lexicon over the last, 5 to 6 years. And the question becomes, is that really a thing? Is that helpful or harmful to say Black excellence? Because excellence is excellence. And why do you need to put Black in front of it? That's a rich dialogue that companies don't have with themselves. There was an advertising that came out, and they said it had something to do with Black scientists. And the scientist went, why did you put Black scientist in front of my name?
I'm just a scientist.
When I was in this article you did, like Black science, like what, huh? Like why? And the authors or the editors were going, I didn't know that was a problem. I'm like, yeah. Like we put the identifier of their race, identity, culture, and heritage in front of the excellent part. And that's how do you feel about that? Should we say Black organizational psychologist? Is that how you want people to know you as a woman organizational psychologist? Or just an organizational psychologist?
Yeah, I get where you're going, 100%. I have two views. To your point, I think there's harmful and helpful. I think it becomes harmful when we're using it as a hashtag and just, it's surface level. It's just another way to maybe divide or provide, inflammatory statements that aren't helpful. But I do think, going back to the construct of excellence, you heard me say, I had my definition. And I think being a Black woman, being a person of color, we're starting to shape this new world of things like leadership and excellence. Right? We're starting to say, we don't buy into this anymore. We're actually thinking about excellence, not from an individualistic perspective, but as a community perspective. And so I think at its core, Black excellence has a very positive intent. And it can be really positive if we think about it from the sense of Black excellence being more of a verb or an action versus a hashtag or just something you put on a wall and take a selfie in front of or something, I think, but the word Black excellence, I think, is this culture of, I'm going to take care of my community and I'm going to make sure everyone's excellent. And that's how I interpret it. Yeah. But I can see how it can be damaging, to your point.
Yeah. And I think there's any number of ways to sort of navigate it, but you have to know yourself and be able to validate yourself first. I talk about self-esteem all the time. It's like self-esteem starts with the word self. I don't need someone else to validate me for my self-esteem to rise. And when you hear terms like Black excellence, it's like, I don't need you to validate me by putting Black in front of it. Like my self-esteem, I'm good. Not everybody can access that, though.
Yeah.
And I think as an organizational psychologist, one of the things that I want you to help our listeners sort of hear is, in the process of becoming who you need to be versus hiding who you are, what do you tell people, just from whether it's neuroscience, brain work, like what do you tell people do to center themselves on validating themselves first in terms of navigating culture?
I think the first thing is to understand your needs. So I think within organizations, oftentimes what happens is So the first thing is we put a lot on the individual, right? When it comes to culture, we say, well, you should take advantage of this program, or you should take this yoga class to be well, or you should stop eating donuts and lower your cholesterol so we can get better numbers as an organization. We don't oftentimes focus on the system. But as an individual, I think we've normalized working and functioning in shitty cultures that are not meeting our needs.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can be in a privileged state here to say this, right? Like, just quit your job, right? I would have the luxury to do that. Other people don't. I mean, you see what happened with Elon Musk and Twitter, right? He was very clear what the culture was. The one thing I will give Elon Musk, not a fan of him or his leadership, but the one thing I'll give him is he's been very clear. This is what the culture is. So you either stay or you go. You opt out. But some organizations aren't that clear. It's kind of under the radar, right? Yeah, we're a remote first culture, but if you're in the office, we consider you more promotable, or we consider you, part of the culture if you're here, right? Those are two different things. So I think as an individual, you really have to understand, what are your needs? Not what has the workplace conditioned you to believe your needs are. What are your needs? Is the organization matching that for you? Do you have the permission and the psychological safety to ask for those things? If you don't, stop there and leave. Because psychological safety is something that takes time to build. And when you don't have it, it's really it's like a bunch of cracks in the culture. They're all over the place, and it can be damaging.
Yeah, and you all need to really listen to Angela right now. I know it sounds like, oh, I can't quit my job. You know what? When you're in a toxic relationship and you know that relationship isn't healthy, you know what you need to do. We didn't say, and you didn't say, and you're not pressuring anybody like leave today. We're saying if it's unhealthy for you, make a plan, execute against the plan where you're having a different quality of life. It's a choice to stay in an unhealthy environment. When I think about a person's race, their identity, their culture, their heritage, those shouldn't be the domains that we sacrifice in order to be successful. No one should hide the intersectionality of their race and their identity, their culture and their heritage in order to be successful in an environment that doesn't celebrate me, as you said. Move to the other side, though, is there's some ownership that we all have to take on what happens next. How do you hold a culture, an organization, accountable for saying what they said they were going to do? What do you tell those leaders? It's like, you said you're going to do this. I assessed your culture. Here's what we found. Like, what do you tell them then? Well,
you have to continue to challenge them and to take it back to what we said we were going to do. I mean, it's really that simple. It's very simple. There are very simple tactics to do this work. You memorialize, you get the results of your assessment, you memorialize what you're going to do, and you measure on that over time, and you keep people updated. But that simple thing of we said we were going to do this, here's the progress we made, it's so hard for organizations. And so one of the parts of my process is even after we do the assessment, we stay with the client for 6 months. And we check in every single month, and we have a scorecard, and we come back to that scorecard, and I'm the accountability partner. So I say, all right, we said we were going to do this. What's the progress? And have you communicated that back to the team? And we do that every month for 6 months. So I think leaders need an accountability partner, whether it's the executive team or somebody who's checking in, because that is the consistency and predictability around it. The consistency is culture. And that's what people, I think, don't realize is, again, they throw a program at the wall and they say, oh, all right, walk away. The consistency is what creates the predictability and really shifts the culture.
Yeah, consistency, the predictability. And I've been using terms some leaders, some organizations, some people in general are really good at following up with somebody. It's like, let me follow up with you about that. I heard you say it. But a lot of people stop and don't follow through. I say follow up and follow through. That's where that consistency comes from. We fall off a lot in our promises we make to other people.
Yeah.
And in your personal relationships, when you don't follow through, your significant other will call you out on it.
Right.
It's like, I thought we were going to,
and
they call you out. In workplace, that doesn't happen unless it's hitting someone's bottom line. When it comes to the health of the culture of the people, we don't follow through nearly enough. So I think there's a couple of rich dialogues waiting to happen about pay disparity between people of color and dominant culture. Like there's a wage gap that has been there for years. And people keep saying there's a wage gap, there's inequities, and we're going to do something about it. But I haven't seen shit happen in some companies. Yet in others, people say, you know what? I've been solving it. I've been working on it. I brought in some experts. We did it. And now we are closer than we were before because they followed through.
And I think you mentioned an important point, which is the follow through doesn't have to always mean perfection.
That's right. That's right.
Just saying or being real to say, hey, you know what? We slipped up here. The vulnerability around that creates psychological safety. If I can be vulnerable with you and say, hey, I messed up, or hey, we didn't meet the mark for you all, you are giving, with that behavior, you're giving permission for other people to do the same thing. Yeah. But unfortunately, in organizations, there's this veil of fakeness that for some reason, I don't know how it got created, but it's this veil of just, it's a barrier. It's a huge barrier. And it impacts psychological safety for the full team.
Yeah. There's something to be said about the follow through and allowing people to make a couple of mistakes and stumble. I don't think we show nearly enough grace to people. And I think there's bias in grace. I mean, you didn't talk about that second. Because so people say, well, you know, I showed that person some grace. You know, I cut them some slack.
Yes.
And I'm like, you did for that person. But there's someone else on your team or there's someone else around you in your space. They didn't do half the mistake that this person did. You show them no grace at all. So now you got bias in the grace.
Yeah.
And I want people to have equitable efforts.
Yes.
When they say I'm showing grace to somebody. I just, it's one of those things that sometimes people don't know how to navigate because they're not used to thinking that way. All they know, to your point earlier, is like how to survive. Like, I just gotta have to survive. I have to make it to the next day, next month, next year. And which, you know, brings me to, why do you keep doing this work? It is one of the most thankless things, spaces that you're in, even though everybody knows you need to be here. Like, why do you keep going? Why? What's driving you?
Reggie, I don't know. I ask myself that every day. I think I was just made for this work. You know, I think that I've always been a truth teller. And I recently had a reading. I don't know, you know, for those of you who are into the crystals and the energy and all of that. Yeah, I believe that my ancestors were truth tellers, and that has bled over into how I'm interacting in the modern world. So that is my value system. Integrity is in my bones. And, you know, I spent a good part of my career focused on coaching women of color in workplaces and helping them navigate the damage that was already caused. And it was clear to me that I needed to make a shift and like actually impact the system that was causing the damage. So I feel like I have a responsibility. I feel like it's just in my bones. I feel like I'm good at it. You know, I have this ability to balance kindness, compassion, but clarity and accountability, which I think is a gift that I don't, not to say I'm, you know, hyping myself up here a little bit, but I'm sure other people have that gift, but I feel like it's something I have to use. And if I'm going to use it anywhere, this is the space I want to use it in.
You just keep going, keep doing it.
Just keep going. And take care of myself. I mean, that's the other thing. You really have to take care of yourself, stay centered, and really be in tune with your truth telling. Yeah. Because it can get hard.
That is really interesting. You know, that fortitude that you're showing, the grit, the fortitude, the, you know, whatever word that people want to use. But it's like you have that, and what you were sort of espousing right now is that's part of who you are. Like that's how you are, not just who you are. Yeah. In that context, though, you still have to grow.
Yes.
So there's growth that happens to all of us because while we're a social species, we're also a species that we're supposed to evolve over time.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the difference between the old you and the new you? How have you noticed yourself grown? You don't need a reading to know this. Like, how do you know you're different than you were before?
Yeah, I feel more like myself now than I have ever in my entire life. I mean, I don't, as a small child, I don't know how I felt necessarily. But I look at, I started my business last year and I was really scared. I was building my business for 7 years, block by block, but finally made the decision to go on my own last year. And that has been the most freeing, empowering thing for me because I'm not doing the code switching. That's damaging to me anymore. I am in a space where I can hold people accountable and not be stifled by politics and unhealthy cultures within an organization. I was kind of just, again, that veil was a barrier for me to even like move or navigate. And now I feel like I can be the best version of myself. So I've changed drastically. I'm a little bit more unapologetic with my boundaries. I'm really clear about what I want to achieve, but I'm also I give myself grace a lot.
Okay.
And and that's maybe some bias because it's myself, right? But I give myself grace a lot and give myself the acknowledgement that I know what I'm doing. Because a lot of times you're in this space and you're like, shit, was that the right thing? Do I really know what I'm doing? Like people make you feel stupid sometimes, right? Or that you don't know what you're talking about. Like you go into someone's organization, you try to tell them what you're seeing as an outsider, and I get shut down daily about my observations. And sometimes it takes me saying the same thing 9 or 10 times in different ways to finally get to the light bulb moment.
Yeah.
But I love to see that progression. So I think I've changed with my resilience. I know that's overused, but my resilience with getting there and working it piece by piece. Before I would be like, just throw up my hands and try something else.
Yeah. I think, as a culture meaning underrepresented groups, culture, Black culture, people of color, multicultural culture, we have always been surrounded by messaging that you have to get along first in order to survive and fit in. And there are some of us generationally that is like, I don't need to do that. Like that thing you were saying earlier about people are here now going, I don't have to put up with and or accept your definition of whatever it is, professional, smart, all those kind of things. And what that pushes us toward is there are people that are showing up in the same spaces they've always shown up in before, but they're really different. You've watched yourself change. If you went back, whatever the reason, went back into corporate America, you would not be the same person you were in corporate America before.
No.
It just, 0%. You couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it.
Do you think you could still get hired?
Could I still get hired? Yes.
In corporate America, would they take you?
I think they'll take me. Will I stay? That's the question. Will they retain me, and will they want to retain me? Sometimes people, they say they want to know what's going on, and they want to know the truth, but they don't. They don't. They want things to stay the same, and they want you to validate the agenda they want to push. So question mark on if I'd be able to stay, but I don't think I would be able to operate within the confines of corporate America.
I'm not sure I'd make it past the interview.
Yeah.
When I'm in corporate, I go back into corporate and I get interviewed. I'm like, Then because I'd ask them those truth-telling things.
Yeah,
and
that's
the answer
true.
didn't come across the right way.
That's true.
And we're having this conversation, and I don't mean to make light of it in any way. As you hear this, I want you to think about what you need to own for the next phase, chapter, season of your life. We need to own what happens next instead of just accept what happens next to us. I like to offer, to anybody who's willing to receive this message right now, that you can actually control what happens next if you take the time to own who you are, where you are. So I've got this mantra, this version that I am pushing out into the world. It's like, be who you are, where you are at this point in your life. Don't be somebody else where you are. Be who you are, where you are. And if you can sort of navigate that from day to day, week to week, storyline to storyline, you'll be more healthy as you put up with the things that we all have to deal with just to survive. We're gonna push toward a little bit of a close. We could do this obviously all day.
Yes.
But our listeners don't have all day to listen. We know that. I know some of you are still last dish, almost done. What are you thankful for? I think our gratitude fuels us to do amazing things. What are you thankful for?
I'm thankful to have a community of other people who are doing this work because we can't do this alone.
Yeah.
And I know we talk about excellence and we have all this individualistic philosophy around this work or, work in general, but this work we can't do alone. So I'm really thankful for you all and for the community that we're able to create and to make an impact, right? Like we're doing the work. At the end of the day, we have to do the work. And it's more fun when you've got friends to do it.
More fun when I got it. More fun when you got friends. Thanks for joining us, Angela. Thanks for taking the time. You spread some messages where it'll be a sort of a growth nutrient for them. It's like, that's going to help me be different. And for some of them, you've actually given them a chance to stick to it. It's like they're because of you listening to your message, they go, hey, I found my grit again.
Yes, I love it.
And
I hope so.
The gratitude and the grace we all need to have, it's human. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being in this space and in this place with me.
Thank you so much, Reggie.